So I will carry on with your permission. Dhruva Maharaj, the benediction he asked for reveals to the world what the greatest treasure in life is. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshastakam, he offers prayer. Na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavitam va jagadisha kamaye mama janamani janmanishwari bhavatad bhakti rohita kitvai. My Lord, I am not asking you for wealth. We may work for wealth, and God may provide, but that's not really why we approach Him. I do not want beautiful woman or man. I do not want fame, prestige, followers. These things may come and go in this world. We may work for them, but when we approach God, Lord Chaitanya's heart, I don't want these things. I don't even want liberation from suffering. Let me just be your servant unconditionally, birth after birth after birth. That was Dhruva Maharaj's mood. That is the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam. Kuvera said, yes, I grant you this benediction, and he disappeared. Now, Dhruva Maharaj went on to rule the world. And we'll tell you very briefly how he did so. Such an example. Although he was a great king, he lived for the welfare of others. Practically every day, he would empty his treasury in order to give charity to others. It is explained that he lived by three principles: yajna, dana, and tapasya. And Srimad Bhagavatam states, and the acharyas in their explanations or commentaries, that these three principles, everyone on spiritual path should observe very carefully. What is yajna? Yajna means our spiritual practices to please the Lord. Haribo. Usually we think yajna means the fire sacrifice, Agnihotra. But what is the purpose of the Agnihotra? It's to please the Lord. Hearing the glories of the Lord is yajna. Purifies our heart. Rendering service to the Lord, praying to the Lord is yajna. But yajnai sankirtana praya yajanti hi sumedasha. In this age of Kali, the most powerful of all yajnas is the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. To regularly purify our hearts through spiritual practice is a prime duty for every human being. And then dana, which is charity. God's grace comes through compassion. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam that there is no service that is more pleasing to the Lord than showing compassion to others. Our Guru Maharaj, even when he was in New York City, Srila Prabhupada, in the Bowery, I think we all know the story. He left India when he was 69 years old. He arrived in New York City 70. He had just had 2 heart attacks on a boat. He was on a cargo ship for 38 days. While crossing the Arabian Sea, he had these repeated heart attacks. There was no medical people. There was nothing except the ocean all around him. When he arrived, he only had about $6, $7, but it was in rupees, so he couldn't change it. 40 rupees to be exact. He was living in very, very simple circumstances. And somehow or other, with some help, he got a little storefront after about 8 months of struggling alone. Only to give the essence of Indians' culture to others, which is universal. One time a reporter challenged Srila Prabhupada, "We have our own religion. Why have you come to our country?" He said, "I have not come to convert. I have come to enlighten. Because the Vedas teach Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma is the essence of every religion. It's universal principle. There are many isms. There is Christianity, and there is Islam, and there is Judaism, and Hinduism, and Buddhism, and Jainism, and Parsi, and atheism, and agnosticism, and so many things. But the essence of all true religion is to love God. Savai pungshang paro dharmo yato bhaktiradhokshache ahoitiki apratihata yagatma suprasidati. The supreme perfection, the supreme occupation for all humanity is unmotivated, unconditional love for God. That is Srimad Bhagavatam. Moses in the Old Testament, Jesus in the New Testament, they both echoed. Same principle. The first and great commandment is to love God with all your heart, all your mind, and your soul. And what happens when you love God? Naturally, spontaneously, you love your neighbor as yourself. Because you see yourself in everyone. You see your beloved in everyone. That is Sanatana Dharma. Srila Prabhupada said, "I have not come to convert, I have come to enlighten." And then he said, "I have come to teach you what you have forgotten. That you are the eternal soul beyond death. And the nature of the soul is to love God." When Prabhupada was asked the same question in London, "Why have you come?" Srila Prabhupada's response was that you British, you ruled over India for about 2 centuries. And you plundered all the jewels and so much of the wealth of India. But you forgot the most precious of all jewels, Krishna. So I've come to bring to London the one thing that you forgot to take. And he gave. So when Srila Prabhupada was living he had nothing, little storefront, he had no money, no followers, but he would do kirtan. And after kirtan, he felt one must give in charity. So he would get somehow or other 1 apple. And however many people were there, he would count and he would cut the apple into that many pieces. If there was 10 people, he would cut it into 10 pieces. If there was 30 people, he would very carefully cut that 1 apple in. That's all he had, into 30 pieces. And he would offer it to Krishna and give everyone a piece of apple. And because Prabhupada saw Krishna in that prasad. What is prasad? Prasadam means the mercy of the Lord. It is not just food. Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhakta prayachati. Krishna tells in Gita, when you offer me something with love and devotion, I accept it. And what happens when the Lord accepts it? He infuses His love, His mercy into that food. And we are communing. We are uniting. Yoga means to unite, to reconnect. We are reconnecting with God just by eating that food. Our body, our minds, our hearts, our souls are being infused by God's grace when we eat prasadam. It's a very holy thing. And actually, I can tell you, so many of the people who became Vaishnavas, serious devotees in the Western world, it all began because of prasad. I can tell so many stories. The power of prasad cannot be calculated with our intelligence. People who were addicted to illicit sex, intoxication, gambling, meeting, who had no faith in God, who were wasting their whole lives, they just get one of those little pieces of apple by Prabhupada, and they come back for more and more. And after he got a little more wealth, he started making gulab jamans. And their hearts changed. And they surrendered their lives to the highest moral principles with faith in God. Yes, when Prabhupada gave that little sliver of an apple, people would, just by Prabhupada's faith in that little apple, people who knew nothing about any of this culture could just feel it. And they came forward, and when he put it in their hand, they just looked at it like, an apple. They didn't know what it was, but it was an apple. They didn't know what is prasad. And they'd eat it, and they would be completely satisfied. So dana, or charity, is very, very essential for one who wants to progress. And tapasya. Tapasya means to refrain from doing those things that further cover our heart with ignorance. It is said that an elephant takes a nice bath, comes out and rolls in the dirt, and he's dirty again. So if we do yajna, and if we perform charity, dana, but we don't perform tapasya, we're not regulating our lives according to moral principles, then we so much undo what we have done. So for grihastas, for brahmacharis, there's different forms of yajna, dana, and tapasya, but the principle is necessary. Dhruva Maharaj lived and ruled the world in this spirit. He lived in the Satya Yuga. 36,000 years he ruled the world. And when he had a son that was competent to take his service, he was not the type of politician that just wants to keep his power till death. He was eager to give it up. He was just doing it as a service. What he really wanted to do is go to Badrik Ashram in Himalayas. Just like Yash, Avanti, they do their business, but every chance they go to Rishikesh in Himalayas. They tell me how they hate coming back to Bombay. But they perform their duties. Well, Rishikesh is next to Haridwar. Haridwar means the door to Hari, which is Badrinath, and Hara, which is Kedarnath. So he went to Badrik Ashram, took his bath 3 times in the cold waters of Alaknanda, and he was chanting God's names, just as his Guru Maharaj, Narada Muni, instructed him. when he was a 5-year-old child, he was still following those principles. Worshipping the Archa Vigraha, the deity of the Lord, meditating on the form of the Lord in his heart of hearts, chanting the holy names of the Lord, serving all the great sages that were assembled. And constantly his hairs were standing on end in ecstasy of love. Tears were streaming from his eyes. He attained perfection. And please listen carefully. At that time, the Supreme Lord sent an airplane from the spiritual world to bring him back home to his eternal home. Dhruva Maharaj saw this magnificent airplane, which was as big as a house, that descended. It wasn't like the airplanes that we ride in. It was beautiful. And there were 2 divine persons who looked just like the Lord of Vaikuntha. Their names were Nanda and Sunanda. They welcomed Dhruva. They said, Dhruva, the Supreme Lord Narayan has personally sent us to take you on this airplane back to Vaikuntha, your eternal home. Listen carefully, please. Dhruva Maharaj was so struck with reverence and confused to see these magnificent divine personalities on this airship. He forgot what he was supposed to do to welcome them. So he just bowed down, folded his hands, and chanted the name of the Lord. And the Bhagavatam explains that if you don't know anything else, that's sufficient. If you are a great Pandit and you know all the mantras and all the yagyas and all the mantras, yantras, tantras, pujas, mudras, and everything else, that's very nice. But if you just chant the name of the Lord sincerely, that is sufficient. And then he went and took his bath and performed all his spiritual morning duties, his meditation, his japa, all of those things. Why? The purpose of doing that is to get that airplane ride. The airplane ride was there. Why did he do it? Because he was not chanting and performing his religious activities just to achieve something. He was doing it as an expression of his love for God. And he wanted to show the world how important it is to show our love for God through our spiritual practice. And then he went and offered his dandavat, pranams, to all of the assembled great sages. He worshipped all the rishis and asked for their blessings for him to go back to Vishnu. Now this is really amazing. He was so humble, so respectful, so grateful. There was not a trace of pride in Dhruva's heart. The airplane was coming for him. Now for most of us, we would be thinking, look at me. The airplane has come for me. It hasn't come for you. None of those sages were fit to get on that airplane. Wouldn't you at least be thinking that way? Of everybody here, this airplane, there's only one ticket for me. And it was sent by Vishnu himself. You would be offering blessings to everyone else. But no, Dhruva Maharaj felt, it is only by the grace of all of you that Vishnu has accepted me. He had no pride. He honored them, respected them. Lord Chaitanya teaches us, Trinarapi sunichena taror iba sehishnuna, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. We should be humble like the grass, tolerant like the tree. We should be very eager to offer all respect to others, and we should not be craving respect for ourselves. In this spirit, we could taste the sweet nectar of God's name and chant constantly. Yes, Dhruva Maharaj honored and worshipped all of those great sages as their servant and asked for their blessings to go back to the Lord. Now, when he was about to board that ship, death personified stood before him. How would you like to meet death personified, face to face? Dhruva Maharaj, he put his foot on the head of death personified and used it as the step to board the Vaikuntha airplane, Vimana. To show the world that a great personality who takes shelter of the Lord is beyond death. When we take shelter of the Lord, we conquer death. Now, rationalistic people will challenge this, that every saint dies too. You go to see the samadhi of your guru and the samadhi of all these great acharyas, what does that mean? They died. The businessman dies, the atheist dies, the saint dies. Death is for everyone. What is the difference? Srila Prabhupada gives example that the cat holds the kitten in her mouth, and the cat holds the rat in the same mouth. Is there a difference? No and yes. There's no difference. It's the same cat in the same mouth. But the difference is in the mind of the kitten and the rat. Because the kitten has taken shelter of the rat. I mean, not the rat, I'm sorry. Somehow the Lord always reveals my own consciousness. Because the kitten has taken shelter of the mother cat, she sees the mother as the most pleasurable well-wisher, who's the embodiment of love and protection and nourishment. But because the rat has not learned to take shelter of the cat, sees the cat as death personified. Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita, I am death personified. I am time. Death is simply an instrument of time. Time is the power of the Lord within this universal creation. When we take shelter of the Lord, vasamsi janani yata vihaya. Death is just a change. It's not the end of the soul. It's just a change. It's the doors to the spiritual world opening before us. But if we don't take shelter, then the power of time, when it manifests as death, it's the most horrible, unknown mystery. When we give up this propensity of I and mine, I'd like to tell one small story. There was a dog, and this dog was really determined to get a bone. Now, for a dog, a bone is a great treasure. Just see how relative life is. For all of you, a bone is abominable. Yes, if you see just an old bone on the street, if you touch it, you take a bath. But for a dog, very, very precious. So that dog got that bone after great efforts. And he was walking with his bone, really proud, enjoying. And he happened to walk by a small river. And he looked in the river and looked down, and there was in the river a dog with a bone in his mouth. Who was that dog? It was a reflection of himself. But the dog was thinking, that dog has a bone. I want his bone. I have a bone, but I want his bone too. So what did he do? He reached with his mouth and tried to get that other dog's bone. But in the process, his own bone fell in the river. And there wasn't another bone. He lost his own bone, trying to get somebody else's bone. What is the moral to the story? When we are not content with what God gives us, and we're always trying to get something else, ultimately we could lose everything. We may be trying to get more and more and more. That's all right. But we cannot be happy unless we're content with the simple things we have. Our reaching out for more and more should be not for contentment. Because if you're not content with who you are and what you are, you cannot be content with anything. Little Vamanadev, the dwarf, asked Bali Maharaj, give me 3 steps of land. Bali Maharaj said, I can give you planets. I can give you mansions. I can give you anything. I'm a great king. Why you only want 3 steps? Vamanadev said, if one is not content within oneself, one can never be content with anything. If you're content within yourself, whether you have little or whether you have lot, you can use it all for great things, for great purposes. It is a great lesson in life. So Dhruva Maharaj was content with the Lord within his heart, and he conquered death, got on the airplane. And just as Nanda and Sunanda were about to bring the ship to the spiritual world, Dhruva Maharaj had a thought in his mind. How could I go back to the spiritual world to enjoy blissful life with the Supreme Lord forever and not bring my poor mother? Just as he was thinking of that, the Lord within the heart reciprocated. Nanda and Sunanda pointed upward and said, look there. And he saw his mother on a ship going back home to the spiritual world. Now I will end our little talk with this very, very divine message. In order for the seed of love to grow in the heart, it must be fertilized and softened by gratitude. In an ungrateful heart, the seed of self-realization cannot really prosper. Dhruva Maharaj was remembering back to one favor that his mother gave him. She was his Pata Pradarshaka Guru, which means she showed him initially the path to self-realization. She told little Dhruva, that if you want to know God, you should go to the forest. That's all. And because of her just saying that one line, and she said it about 36,000 years before, but he remembered, and he was grateful. This is the consciousness of a virtuous person. Anyone who has ever helped us, we do not forget. We're always grateful. I once met a sage in the Himalayas, and he told me, anything good another person does for you, you should never forget it. Anything good that you have done for others, it's best if you forget it. Because then we become proud. But we should always be grateful. Yes, Dhruva Maharaj remembered how long ago his mother helped him. His mother loved him. And by his thought, by his prayer alone, his mother was qualified to spiritual perfection. And in this case, our beloved Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, writes that she was like his guru. That's the way he considered. And Prabhupada said in his own humility that he's hoping that out of his tens and thousands of disciples, he said, if one of my disciples could just become like Dhruva Maharaj, then by his prayer, Prabhupada said, even I may be able to go back to the spiritual world. Prahlad Maharaj, by his love for the Lord, even Hiranyakashipu went back to the spiritual world. And the Lord explained, if one awakens love of God within this world, 10 generations of all family members in the past and the present, they all get liberated, whoever they are. Simply because the Lord is so indebted to those who love him. He wants to give his kindness to all those people who that person loves, directly and indirectly. Dhruva Maharaj taught that sense of gratitude. And these different characteristics that we have heard of in tonight's narration are the virtues that every sincere spiritual aspirant, whether they are husbands or wives or mothers or fathers, or whether they're sadhus, whether they're farmers or business people or politicians or lawyers, architects, whether they're men or women, old or young, these are universal virtues that should be understood and cultivated. And by doing so, the greatest of all treasures will be revealed, not only from within our hearts, but in every aspect of our life. Thank you very much.